All right, folks. If you are tuning in, this is not a farce. We are actually back. Factually Football here. Adam Hensley, Cody Felger, and Andrew Thomason coming at you. It's definitely been a few weeks off. We were just talking off air about how life has just really kind of happened to all of us, and but happy to be back talking football. Before we get into it, you guys want to say anything to the folks, guys?
Happy to be back. It's, as you said, it's been a couple weeks, and this coming week or weekend, I should say, of NFL football is going to be a lot of fun. So here we go.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's crazy since probably we last recorded to now. The outlook is slightly different, to say the least, for the Colts. So, yeah, excited to get back into it, talk some ball.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've all been kind of pinging each other here or there via text back and forth, but it's been, as the Colts are wont to do, quite a roller coaster, I'd say, over the last few weeks. I can't say that I'm still 100% sold on Coach Reich, but I'll try to leave opinion out of this cast as much as possible. But I am looking at the division and thinking a little bit about some of our preseason prognostications. And, Jacksonville hasn't really performed up to the level I thought they would, but they're still right there. Houston's just as bad as we thought they were, and they're still not out of it. The Colts are having major identity crisis, it seems like, week to week. We're right in the thick of it, and the reality is I'm calling it AFC Super Bowl week or AFC South Super Bowl week, right? The Colts win this game, and their destiny's in their hand, and they're going to Tennessee. It may be a little bit of a payback type game, right, from a couple weeks back. But what are you guys kind of looking for this weekend from the AFC South as a whole, and then obviously from the Colts?
I feel like Jacksonville's kind of fallen off a little bit of a cliff, to be honest. They started out 2-1. I mean, they went to the Chargers, went to LA, played the Chargers, and I mean, really just dominated, I think, for most of, if not the entire game. And then they come home to Houston and lose. And then obviously they lost to Indianapolis last week, and then I'm blanking on the other team that they lost to. But three pretty just kind of head-scratching losses. I feel like after 3 weeks, a lot of people were proclaiming that Jacksonville was going to win the AFC South, and they looked like a team that could potentially make some noise. But as you were kind of saying, Adam, they kind of turned out to be not as good as I think some people thought. And then for Houston, I mean, they had the one win against Jacksonville of all teams, the parity of the NFL. There's nothing like it. I really believe that. Certainly not in any other major sport on a week-to-week basis, that is. In the AFC South Super Bowl, as you called it, Adam, the Titans and Colts, is we'll get into a little bit more in detail here soon. But as far as the AFC South goes, I know the Jaguars are facing the Giants, so that'll be a tough test for them even at home. And then as far as the Texans go, I'm not sure who they play at the moment, but I don't really too concerned. Houston, I think, is full rebuild. They have some nice pieces. Jacksonville, we'll see what happens. They could go on a run. And like I said, Colts Titans should be fun.
Yeah, I echo everything you said, Andrew. And, as we expected, even though it's a little bit later than we expected, this is still Colts and Titans for the division. Both these teams, same record. I guess the Colts technically have a worse record because of the tie, but yeah, this is the game. Ultimately, guys, and maybe this is a little extreme, but I do feel like this is the biggest game of Frank Reich's career as the Indianapolis Colts head coach, because if you don't win this division game, you have no shot at this division, guys. You've already played. This will be your 5th game already out of 7 weeks in the AFC South. So if you come out of it and you haven't at least beat Tennessee once, I don't really see, a clear path to how you even think you're gonna have a shot at the division, and I honestly think this game, and maybe this is a little extreme, but I feel like this game might determine if Frank Reich's back with the Colts next year or not.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Cody. I know you, I, and Andrew have kind of had text banters back and forth, but is it just me, or does it feel like every week is like that with Frank? Pretty much since the beginning of the year. I'm like, if he doesn't win against Kansas City, and then they won against Kansas City, and then it's like, if he doesn't win against Jacksonville last week, and then they beat Jacksonville, it's like, well, like, I don't know. I'm so lost as to what he wants to do, because I feel like the players want to play, but it's just, I don't know. It just seems to be lost in translation, and as for Houston, Andrew, just, they're playing the Raiders this week in Vegas. Neither team is really showing much. So who knows? Houston may come up with a quote unquote upset. They are 3-1-1 against the spread this year. So that's pretty decent odds. But right now, Vegas is favored by 6.5. So pretty low scoring affairs this week too. It's kind of been interesting. I feel like the NFL in general has been overall lower scoring this year. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but games seem to be in more the 42-45 range instead of like the 54, 55, 60 type range like we were used to seeing some of the bigger shootout games. But and then the Colts and Titans, like you both said, the reality is these are two teams that definitely have massive holes. For Indianapolis, I'd say their biggest hole is identity. With no Jonathan Taylor, it's pretty clear that they have no problem turning to Matt Ryan. He's been serviceable. The turnovers weren't as bad this last week, and I think at the end of the day, that's really how the Colts win. If he doesn't turn the ball over, that's where the Colts can win. And then you've got Tennessee, who quite honestly has a pretty terrible passer, and we remember what that was like last year. They go as Derrick Henry goes, and I feel like the Colts go as Jonathan Taylor goes. So, guys, maybe 500 yards rushing combined between the two teams this week. I don't know. So, yeah, and for the last game of the week, and I think we'll just kind of jump right into it. We're talking about Jacksonville and the Giants, right? The Giants are like the Cinderella of the NFL right now. Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, and crew have really got it kind of cooking with 3 straight wins against Green Bay and, Chicago. And I'd dare say maybe the most impressive one of the year was the Baltimore game last week, that they kind of held on and beat Baltimore. Obviously at home for the Giants, but that's a pretty big win against a team that a lot of people were talking about winning the AFC possibly at the beginning of the year. What are you guys thinking about this game?
Yeah, for me, I think it comes down to the Giants' defense versus Jacksonville's offense. And Jacksonville offensively, to their credit, they haven't been terrible this year. Trevor Lawrence has, I think, progressed nicely with Doug Peterson as his play caller. Jacksonville has legitimate weapons, I think, in Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Marvin Jones, Travis Etienne, James Robinson, so on and so forth, Evan Ingram. And I think that's the story. I think Wink Martindale has done a fantastic job with that Giants defense. I think part of the Giants' success that they had against Baltimore last week was because Martindale knows Baltimore so well, being the defensive coordinator there for so many years. That obviously plays to your advantage, I would think. Can Jacksonville get the ground game going? I mean, they did against the Colts, and we'll kind of hit on that here in a little while. 243 yards, 7.5, I believe, on average per carry. I mean, that's. I mean, if you're going to win a game, you want to lean on your strength, and I feel like Jacksonville's run the ball pretty well this year. I mean, but it's the AFC South, and what I mean by that is Jacksonville 1 week, like I mentioned earlier, can go to Los Angeles and whoop the Chargers, and then they can come home a few weeks later and score 6 points against Houston, who might be in line for the first overall pick. So, I mean, who knows? I will say between the two teams, I think the Giants are really, really well coached. Their offensive line outside of Andrew Thomas is very, we'll call it patchwork, but it's getting the job done. Saquon Barkley looks like Saquon Barkley back when he played at Penn State. Giants wide receivers outside of like Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton are very hit or miss. I think it's a low-scoring game, but I actually like the Giants just because I think they're so well coached. they've really shown you something over the last couple of weeks. I mean, as you were mentioning, Adam, statement wins against Green Bay and Baltimore, no easy feat. Good for the Giants and their fans, and I think there's a chance that they come out with a win.
Yeah, Jacksonville is very, like you said, very hot and cold. And I know they're a very young team in general. They have a lot of, high round picks from the last couple of years of being so bad. And yeah, and I just feel like New York, like nobody saw this coming, right? Nobody saw this happening. But New York can, they're really well coached, like you mentioned, and I really liked what they've been able to do over there, and obviously having Saquon Barkley, like you mentioned, definitely helps in that department. But Jacksonville has some talent too. I don't want to act like it's going to be that Jacksonville will have a chance in this game, because I really think they do. I think just ultimately it'll come down to, I feel like, coaching, and I feel like right now the Giants have the edge in that department. Although, like we said, Jacksonville has two really good running backs, and if they can properly utilize them, which I think Doug Peterson's done a pretty good job of that in general with ETN and James Robinson, I definitely think it gives them an opportunity, to take control in this game. I think ultimately it will really depend on, can this Jacksonville secondary hold up? And can their, front four get some pressure on Daniel Jones? We saw last week, with all the draft capital they invested, they didn't get Matt Ryan once, which is saying something, because it's been really bad this year. And so, Matt Ryan was able to really carve up this Jacksonville defense. So could Daniel Jones potentially do that as well? I don't know. It's just an interesting matchup for sure. Two teams kind of going in opposite directions right now. And this is obviously a huge game for Jacksonville to try to get back on track after starting the season so hot. So I'm looking forward to this game. I do think the Giants will win this game just because of the coaching, but I just don't want to count out Jacksonville either, because there is certainly talent there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing when you draft high, right, Cody? I mean, that Jacksonville should have talent there, right? They've drafted high enough over the years, and they do, and it's really, quite honestly, they blamed Urban Meyer for some of the downfall, and I think they're better, but their record isn't exceptionally better. To me, this one's pretty simple. It crazy enough, Jacksonville runs the ball 58.3% of their plays, and the Giants run the ball 56.7%. It's a pretty high percentage in general, as we'll talk about some other teams. But the reality to me is the differential of Trevor Lawrence in a clean pocket versus Trevor Lawrence under pressure. And I'll just give you some rating stats. In a clean pocket, he's rated 110.7. That's a pretty darn good quarterback rating. Under pressure, 37.8. So the key to the game here is that defensive line of the Giants, right? Can they get through? Can they make an impact? Can they make it muddy? Can Lawrence and Thibodeau get off? I think that's a big piece. And on the offensive side of the ball, obviously we know Saquon's a big threat, but let's be real honest. Shaquille Griffin got beat like a drum last week. Whether it was Alec Pierce on him for a good amount of the time, Michael Pittman took advantage of him a few times, Paris Campbell ate him up. I mean, this is not the Shaquille Griffin that we're used to seeing of years past with Seattle. So, I mean, I think if the Giants get up early and get up, probably via Saquon and the defense, I think they've got enough stay power to just bury Trevor Lawrence and put him under pressure and turn the ball over. Again, they did that last week against Lamar, and if you can turn Lamar over, I hate to think what you're going to do to Trevor Lawrence. So, kind of with it there, it sounds like we're all on the same page. It's a Jaguars loss more than likely. Crazy enough, I haven't been betting much this year, but if I were betting, I would bet against the spread this week. Somehow the Giants are underdogs by 3 points. I know it's in Jacksonville, but these teams are not close enough in my book for Jacksonville to be favored. So got a little cash, go to your bookie, throw some cash down, go Giants. Next game, guys, let's talk about the Texans and the Raiders, and then we'll save the Colts for last. Feel free to pop in, whoever wants to start off.
Yeah, I kind of like you were saying earlier, the Raiders haven't really done much. Although I think, honestly, a lot of their losses have been close. They kind of remind me, in a sense, of the Minnesota Vikings of last year. Minnesota had, 7 or 8 games that were one possession games that they ended up losing. And in the NFL, obviously, that could be the difference. And I think for Las Vegas, it's not a lack of weapons. Derek Carr is a B to B plus quarterback, in my opinion. Josh Jacobs is a B running back. You've got Devontae Adams. You've got Hunter Renfrow. You've got Darren Waller. I mean, you've got weapons all over that roster. The thing with me is coaching. I haven't really agreed with some of the moves that Josh McDaniels has made throughout a couple of games. I mean, think about their last couple of games. They were up 20-0 or 20-3 against Arizona, and then they blew that late. And then last week they had a 17-0 lead in Arrowhead and somehow managed to blow that one. It's when you get up like they have in these last 2 to 3 weeks, you have to obviously play with some urgency and be able to sustain the success that you had early on. They haven't been able to do that. Defensively, I think they're okay. They've got a couple of nice pieces. Trayvon Morgan, I think, is a really nice safety. They've got a couple of nice corners. But pass rush-wise, I think Chandler Jones has been a little underwhelming. Max Crosby's been phenomenal, but he's not enough. And I think that there are too many holes on the Raiders' defense right now. Switching sides to Houston, I said it earlier, I still think they're in a rebuild. Dameon Pierce looks like a sleeper. Let me rephrase. He looks like a star, potentially. I mean, he's had a couple of really nice back-to-back games. Late round draft pick, just one of those guys that kind of flies under the radar, but looks like to be a steal. And then you've got Brandon Cooks, you've got Nico Collins, Brevin Jordan. They're okay weapons. Is Davis Mills the answer? 50% of me says yes, and 50% says no. But the offensive line outside of Laramie Tunsil is okay. Their rookie guard, whose name is escaping me at the moment, has played pretty well. Defensively, they've got some nice pieces. Derek Stingley's been phenomenal, but outside of Derek Stingley, it's very kind of, I feel like it's kind of thrown together. As far as a winner goes, I think it could go either way, but I think Las Vegas is at home. If you ask me, I think Las Vegas looks at this game with a little bit more sense of urgency. I think they're a little more desperate just because you fall behind in a really odd division, a division in the AFC West that many people thought was going to be the best in football. Is kind of a 2-team race between the Chargers and the Chiefs right now. So, I mean, if you're Las Vegas, I mean, potentially, if you can start stacking some wins, you can maybe climb back into at least third place and potentially make a wild card run. Although teams that start 1-4, 1-5 don't usually go on to make the playoffs. It's very rare. So I'm going to take Las Vegas just because I think, again, not to beat the same drum, but I just think Houston is in too much of a rebuild. I think, again, Las Vegas is at home. I feel like they've gotten out to early leads in their games and they just haven't been able to hold on. So give me Las Vegas.
Okay, so I feel like right now on paper, even though Las Vegas's record doesn't necessarily indicate it, I do feel like they're a much better team than the Houston Texans. I feel like the Texans, they have, what you said, Andrew, they have a couple nice young pieces, but I think that's all it is for them really right now. A couple guys, but overall as a team from 1 to 53, I don't think it's really that close from a talent standpoint. And so I think Vegas honestly comes out very angry, as they should be, from what happened a week ago. And I don't think this is a close game, guys, just because I really feel like, just the talent will outweigh, maybe some of the other things in this game. And I just don't really feel like Houston would have much of an answer, for Devontae Adams and for, if Darren Waller, I don't know if he's going to play in this game or not. But some of those guys, I feel like Vegas's offense it's still dangerous. It still has weapons, and they do have Josh Jacobs, who I've always liked as a player and always thought he's a really good underrated running back in this league. And so, yeah, I do feel like Vegas. You mentioned it, Andrew. They have also some nice pieces on defense. They have two really good pass rushers. Matt Crosby, probably one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL. And then Chandler Jones, who, while he hasn't really done a lot in the sack department, he has actually he's such a good player. You can never count him out. He's been a multi 10 plus sack guy for pretty much his entire career. So I do feel like, though, Houston's strength is their tackles. So we'll see how they hold up, how Tunsil and Titus Howard hold up against these two guys. I think it's going to be that's going to be a big battle I'm watching in this game, is just the tackles versus the ends in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a game of wills, and the reality is like you said, Andrew. I mean, Vegas's losses have been brutal. None have been more than 6. Their largest deficit in general was the one that they won, which was 9 points. And they've lost to okay teams, right? I mean, you lose to Kansas City. It's not like you're losing to a dog here. And in Houston, Dameon Pierce is a stud. I do think he's going to be something, but I just don't know where the other offense comes from. And I think you let Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, as we've kind of all talked about so far, if you let those guys tee off, I just don't know how Houston gets a stop. The more and more I talk about Houston, the more and more it aggravates me that the Colts tied them the first game of the year. I don't see it. I don't really know what they're trying to do there. And I think we're being nice to say that they've got some pieces there. I mean, at the end of the day, they're an NFL team. They're going to have some pieces. They're just flat out the worst in the AFC South and probably one of the worst 5 teams in the NFL. With that being said, again, I think it's Jacobs all day. I think he's probably been my biggest surprise overall as far as performance this year. It wasn't like I thought he would be bad. I've always thought he's been serviceable. But to watch him angry run people over is like pretty awesome. So keep doing what you're doing, Josh Jacobs. Fun to watch. And I really just flat out don't think Houston has a chance. All right, the listener's been waiting, fellows. Let's talk about it. It's the Colts game this week. Who wants to hit it off?
I got you. Yeah. So I talked about it before. I think this is obviously, like you said earlier on the pod, this is the Super Bowl of the AFC South because, whoever doesn't win this game, I mean, this is the second meeting between these two teams, right? So whoever loses this game, I think takes a huge hit. I think it was something like for the Colts, like they're in the 20% to make the playoffs if they lose, and like 75% to make the playoffs if they win. So this is a huge game is a massive understatement of the century. I mean, yeah, guys, let's be honest. You had plenty of opportunities in that first game to beat Tennessee. Your defense did the part in the second half. They shut out Tennessee, and their offense just could not match them. And so, we've just had so many question marks and so many frustrations with this offense and the way it's been run. And I really think Tennessee is, they have a defensive backfield that really can be exposed. And so I think that has to be the game plan coming in. The Colts implemented that no huddle last week, which I really thought was very effective in the passing game. And, you would even use Deion Jackson, as an extension of that running game through the passing game. And so I really feel like in this game, the Colts are going to have to just expose, if that offensive line can hold up first off, but they have an opportunity to really expose this Tennessee pass defense, which is one of the worst in the NFL. It's just the ultimate question, guys. Can this patchwork unit of the offensive line for the Colts, can it hold up? Can Dennis Kelly hold up at left tackle? Can Matt Pryor just not get Matt Ryan killed out there at right guard? Those are my biggest questions in this game. And I think if the Colts can do that off from an offensive standpoint, I really think they can bust this game wide open because Yeah, that's been their biggest Achilles heel, has just been their offense. And then, ironically enough, when their offense plays well, their defense kind of struggles. So if they can put a full game together, I really think that that's the way they're going to have to attack this Tennessee defense.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, Cody. Keys for me starts up front, offensive line, defensive line. 4 sacks for the Colts against Trevor Lawrence and company last week. Can they get home with Ryan Tannehill or to Ryan Tannehill? Can they make him uncomfortable? Can they make him hold the ball just a little bit longer than he would maybe like to, make some errant throws? Offensive line, as you mentioned, Cody, it's a little more patchwork. 58 dropbacks for Matt Ryan, no sacks. It's almost like the Colts have Pro Bowlers and all pros along their offensive line or something, and they just didn't play for the first 5 weeks. I don't know, but they played really well last week, so credit where it's due. The run game for the Colts is kind of still very hit or miss. I think they had 42 yards total on the ground last week. You're not going to win every single game throwing it nearly 60 times. Ryan completed a franchise record, 42 passes. That's got to be close to a career high for him personally. You've got to be able to find a heavy balance there. Tennessee, as we know, when these last 2 teams played, did a nice job on Jonathan Taylor, held him to his lowest rushing totals in the Frank Reich era. And if you're Tennessee, I think Taylor obviously practiced fully today, as did Nyheim Hines. My guess is they played, but I'm not exactly sure. Tennessee's game plan will obviously change, I would think, pretty drastically if Deion Jackson is in there instead of Taylor or Hines. And that's not to say that Deion can't play, because he can. He played really well last week, over 100 scrimmage yards. He's played really well in back-to-back weeks, actually. I think he's kind of found a pretty nice role for this Colts offense in the absence of Taylor and Hines. But offensively for the Colts, like you said, Cody, can the offensive line hold up? I think it can. I think where I have a little bit of concern, I think like a lot of people, is Matt Pryor on what's likely going to be Jeffrey Simmons. I'm sure they'll line Simmons up over Pryor at some point, knowing that he's the weakest of the 5 offensive line in terms of his ability to pass protect. So can they hold up? Like you said, can Ryan get the ball out of his hands fairly quickly? Do they, like you kind of were mentioning, Cody, can they do more up tempo, more no huddle? That takes away some of the things I think you'd like to do offensively, but if they can kind of get things clicking again early and often, then I think it'll work in Indy's favor. And then defensively for Indianapolis, 2 things. Can they stop Derrick Henry? 114 scrimmage yards or rushing yards, a touchdown. He played really well. In the first half, when these teams played in week 4, and then in the second half, the Colts kind of slowed him down a little bit. Can they get off to a faster start on defense? They gave up 243 yards on the ground to 3 different Jaguars backs last week, which is very uncharacteristic, given they were the 4th-ranked rushing defense coming into the game. Is that more of an outlier? It was that kind of just, it's a really bad game, but the other 5 games that we had seen prior to that showed us that the Colts are a much better run defense. Or do they miss Kwity Paye that much? We know he's one of the, arguably their top run defender along that defensive line. Is his absence really playing that much of a substantial role in their inability to stop the run this last week? I guess we'll see. And Derrick Henry, the runaway locomotive rushing champ that he has been, he awaits, and the Colts are going to have to find a way to stop him. I honestly think that they're going to stack the box quite a few times, because Tennessee's offensive weapons, receiver especially, they're thin because of injuries, and they're just very unproven. Robert Woods, he's okay. Westbrook-Akina's got 130 yards, I think, total on the season. Austin Hooper is hit or miss. It's outside of Woods, the veteran. I mean, they don't really have any reliable, I don't think, pass catchers, do the Titans. And if you're Indianapolis, do you almost play that does that work in your favor? Do you play to that weakness and, like I said, stack the box and force these Tennessee receivers that don't either have enough experience, a la Kyle Phillips, or just haven't performed as well as the Titans would have liked, a la Robert Woods? Do you force those players to beat you, and do you kind of sell out for the run on the majority of downs? Now, obviously, you can't play an entire game like that, but the idea is to take away Henry first and eliminate quick throws, up tempo. I think that's where the Colts have defensively have really fallen into trouble, specifically against AFC South opponents. That just kill them underneath, up tempo. But their defense has played pretty well these last couple of weeks outside of, like I said, the very bizarre 243 yards surrendered on the ground. I'd like the Colts' chances to come out with a win, to be honest with you. I think the offensive line's got to hold up. I think Matt Ryan's going to have a field day with, I think, one of the worst secondaries, certainly ranking-wise, in the league. And I think the Colts can do enough to stop Henry and really prevent this Tennessee passing game from taking over. Ryan Tannehill had only 137 yards back in week 4, so it's not like he picked you apart and carved you up. But massive, massive, massive game for both teams, really. Certainly for the Colts. You haven't won a division since 2014. You're trying to potentially host a home playoff game. These are the kind of wins you have to have. And I kind of will echo something that you said earlier, Cody. This is probably the biggest game of Frank Reich's tenure in Indianapolis. Just because of how the last couple of seasons have gone. They haven't been able to make the playoffs. They've fallen short. I mean, we all know, we've seen it with our own eyes. You have to be able to beat a team that's notoriously had your number for the last 5 games. You got to be able to go on the road. You got to be able to hold up, and you got to be able to come away with a win if you want to win your division and you want to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you guys all bring up super solid points, and honestly, I'm just going to boil it down to, if the Colts play the same game they did last time, sans 1 or 2 things, they absolutely destroy Tennessee. I mean, we outgained them. The only place we didn't was on the ground, but we still outgained them by over 120 yards, and literally they ran the ball for 127 yards. We ran it for 38 that week. The bottom line, they turned the ball over 3 times. Matt Ryan doesn't turn the ball over in this game and has the same style game that he's had over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I don't even think it's a question. I think we go into Tennessee and walk. But that's a big if. That's the difficulty, if you will. As crazy as it sounds, I don't know who the officials are yet. I have not seen that. I'm not sure if it's released. I'm actually looking right now. It does not look like it's released as of yet. Bottom line, the Colts should be in a better space than they're in if they want to prove to everybody in the NFL, but more importantly, in their home in Indianapolis itself, you need to come out and beat an inferior team, and Tennessee's an inferior team. I'm sorry. Even if Tennessee wins this game or goes on to win the AFC South, they are a team that gets beat in the first round. And for me to think the Colts aren't that team that gets beat in the first round, they have to win a game like this. Andrew, you talked about it. Look, Matt Ryan threw for 327 yards against this porous secondary. I'd like to see a few things, right? I'd like to see a little quicker pass game from us. You saw Paris Campbell get involved last week. And for those of you that, listened a while back, even, I've been tooting Paris's horn for a while, but the guy has the 8th best separation yardage in the NFL in his routes. I did some research the other week. He and Kylan Granson were number 8 and number 2 in the NFL. So it isn't like Matt Ryan isn't getting open receivers, which was kind of one of my initial thoughts. He just wasn't finding them. So it was good to see Paris last week be more involved. I think you get him involved in some jet sweeps even this week. Alec Pierce has clearly done, in fairness, what we kind of expected him to do. You've got some injuries, but I think every team does at this point of the year. I think this is the Colts game to lose, and I'd echo it. I think every game from here on out for Frank Reich is darn near the most important game of his coaching tenure at the Colts. Doesn't necessarily get any easier with Philly, Dallas, Minnesota. As crazy as it sounds, the Giants, the Chargers, the Patriots at the Patriots, surprise, surprise, on the schedule. So the reality is I think all these games are big, but I do think that they have the firepower. JT did go in practice today. It does sound like he is going to go. Newsflash, by the way, I've got the Arizona and New Orleans game. Rodrigo Blankenship is kicking for Arizona and has already missed an extra point. So
I'm watching it too. It's funny. He made like 250-yarders and then he missed an extra point. And then I just watched Andy Dalton throw 2 pick sixes back to back. So, prime Thursday night football for you.
Right. Stay hot, Andy Dalton. Big red. But yeah, so I mean, kind of to tie it on a bow, we can't really stress it enough. It's a great week for us to come back and be back at it. The hope is we'll continue to be at it every week from here on out, listeners. So we appreciate those of you who've stayed loyal and probably been going, what in the world's going on with you guys? Where have you been? But please, if you don't see us or if you don't see something out there, feel free to reach out. But also check out Cody and Derek's Bringing the Juice podcast. They've got a lot of good content out there. Great guys, obviously. Cody's on our show, so we obviously think enough of him as a human. So definitely check them out if for any reason we're not able to keep up on the weekly. But anything to say to the folks before we sign off for the night, guys?
Yeah. Do me a favor before you go to bed, listeners. I might cry myself to sleep because I'm facing Arizona's defense in fantasy. They have 20 points already.
Oh gosh.
I'm gonna end it on that.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll say a Chase McLaughlin appreciation right now goes a long way. So gosh, I'm just so glad we don't have to worry about our kicker anymore. Shout out to Chase McLaughlin. He's a legend.
Can we just lock him up, please?
Please. I still am baffled that the Colts decided to go with Hot Rod over him because I think he was clearly the better kicker.
Yeah.
I really don't understand why they tried, moved on from him because I thought he did great in the 2019 season, all things considered. So hopefully a second time around he sticks.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, everybody, and stay tuned to the podcast. This will be on YouTube. This will be on all your podcast favorites. It'll probably drop Friday or Saturday. We should be able to get around to it. So have a great one, and talk to y'all later.